so we are here on a lovely Sunday morning in the Dyslexia Association headquarters. So I hope you're at least watching this from your bedroom or from your very nice breakfast that you're about to have. But I am so excited to be here today because we have Dean and Bodhi here to speak to us, who have come all the way from America to talk to us.
Just to see you.
So we're so excited. And we are going to be talking a little bit around kind of the dyslexic experience in America, and a little around kind of, I suppose, dyslexia and self-esteem, about kind of the positives around dyslexia and things like that. And Dean, like, you're a big superstar. You've done like TED Talks on this and everything. So we're so privileged to have like such an expert here. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. I think the main qualifying fact is that I'm dyslexic, of course, and I, had a very fortunate upbringing insofar as I had a very early diagnosis.
Yeah.
I was in the equivalent of, well, we call it third grade. I'm not sure what you would call it here in Ireland, but that's a very early age to be diagnosed. And then I had a family that was able to get me the reading remediation that I needed. So as a 1973 baby, that was a very progressive agenda.
Yeah.
But, despite all those advantages, I still couldn't help but to internalize the failure that I was feeling on a daily basis in school, and believed that that was a commentary on my intelligence and my quality as a human being. And I started to internalize that narrative and believe that I was broken and stupid. What that eventually translated to was a very deteriorated sense of self and sort of a malignant self-esteem.
Yeah.
I was able to work hard and get into a good university, where I was then able to sort of explore what, self-directed learning was all about, and found out that I really did enjoy learning. And I didn't have a learning disability per se.
Yeah.
I had a reading disability, but when I found subjects that intrigued me, I was voracious, and I really consumed content very, very quickly. So when this young man was born, and I married a dyslexic woman, and so he was I refer to him as a purebred dyslexic.
Of course,
and,
top of the line.
Perfect genetic coding in the dyslexia field. And I just recognized that if I weren't going to be proactive, he was destined to go through an educational system that was going to have the same detrimental effect that it had on both me and my wife.
Yeah.
And so I decided I was going to do something about that. And we live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is basically Boston, the home of Harvard and MIT. And I asked these universities to help me create a program that would address the self-esteem of students with dyslexia by introducing them to the cognitive advantages associated with our brain construction.
Yeah.
So here we are 5 years later, our 5-year anniversary, and we've created 3 different curriculum that focus on the paths that dyslexics are disproportionately successful in. That's entrepreneurship, engineering, architecture, and the arts. And we use that as a conduit to expose students to what they're good at, because they are painfully aware of what they're not good at. So that allows them to start to build self-esteem, and metric that we track is academic tenacity. Do students have more willingness to stick with an academic project after taking our courses than they did before? And I'm happy to say that certainly indicates that they are. So it's all because of this guy right here. That's the motivation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's so interesting, because often we speak to parents, and I think that often some of them are dyslexic themselves, and they have this huge feeling of responsibility of it's almost the dread, and it's not the dread that you're telling them that their child is dyslexic. It's the fear of what's going to come because they've been through it. So I think that's a hugely interesting thing, that you were just like, no, we're going to do better, and we're going to make sure that there's things in place. And that's really interesting. Now, Bodhi, I'm coming to you in 2 seconds, but I just want to let everyone that's watching know, if you have a particular question for Bodhi or Dean, make sure to comment underneath, and we'll get through as many as possible. You might want to just sit back and watch, but if you do have a particular question, just let us know. We're aiming to be on for about 30 minutes. So make sure you get them in as soon as possible. We'll also be saving this and pinning it to the top of our page, as well as creating a YouTube video with it so you can watch it at your leisure as well. Now, Bodhi, what do you think about all the things your dad had like put in place for you?
Well, I'm very, very happy that he did, because I can't imagine it without all the advantages. Don't get me wrong, still really, really tough in school. Yeah. We go to I'd say a fairly hard school. And I'm really happy, and I get the things that I need to get through school. Enjoying school is very, very different.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes can be hard to take for people, because I think I speak to parents sometimes and they say, oh, we're big readers in our house. And the look on their face when I say, your child may never love to read. Your child will learn how to read, and your child will be able to get information from things, but they may never love to read. They may choose to have podcasts or audiobooks or things like that. And I think we place so much emphasis on this, like love of reading as some sort of a achievement or like a kind of a virtuous thing. But I think, I think it's definitely important to acknowledge that actually it can remain hard, and it is hard for people sometimes.
Well, and you know, reading is you know, for many people that do enjoy reading, I think they enjoy that immersive process of losing themselves in a novel. You know, that is a particular medium that works for many, but doesn't work for us. And it doesn't mean that we can't still find that same opportunity through audiobooks. We're just reading through our ears versus our eyes, right? We're still getting to evoke our imagination and go to these wonderful fantasy worlds. But there is a bit of a longing for people that do enjoy reading to have their children have that same experience, and they're having it just in a different way. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think we speak to teachers a lot about like actually that there's not one correct way to learn. Like you don't sit down and write something out 20 times. That actually works for very few people and no dyslexics. But I think that like that actually to appreciate that we can learn so well through YouTube videos, through going to see things and kind of touching them and feeling them, and that multi-sensory approach to learning. Is that what you find as well, that actually that it can be hard to accept that that's actual learning as well?
You know, I'll speak to that, and please chime in if you have. You know, one of the things that, you know, when I was growing up, they introduced something called spell check, and everyone said, "Oh my gosh, that's cheating! If you don't learn how to spell, you're cheating." Now, if you hand in a paper and you haven't spell checked, the teacher will say, "Why didn't you spell check?" Right?
Yeah.
And so these different modalities are introduced into the classroom over time, and what seems strange or foreign at first ultimately gets adopted. And one of the things that I find is bizarre is that almost every one of us has a smartphone. And if we want to find out information, we can Google an answer. And that sort of accessibility is available to us in the workplace, in our private lives. Why is it that we haven't introduced it to the classroom? Because using those different modalities, video, as you said, I mean, every dyslexic I know, young or old, goes to YouTube to learn.
Oh, first thing I do. Yeah.
And, you know, I understand there are perils associated with technology in the classroom, but it's sort of like a knife, right? A knife in the hand of somebody with ill will is dangerous, but a knife in the hand of a surgeon is a positive thing. We've got to use this technology for mindful purposes to improve education, and that's how we offer our curriculum. Actually. So,
and Bodhi, do you find that you kind of like to use some technology and kind of
Yes, I much prefer technology to like actually writing things down, especially because it's spell check. Also, just to chime into something that we just were talking about, a lot of people that aren't dyslexic love to read to like lose track of time, but for dyslexics, you've got to find, in my opinion, you got to find something different. Like for me, it's playing sports like hockey or lacrosse. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But it's kind of like a combination of the two. It's like hurling. So playing a sport and like doing ceramics with my dad. My dad loves ceramics. How do you lose track of time?
No, I mean,
besides tracking the time. He loves to track the time.
Well,
somebody's just said you're just being a bit boring there. He was just kind of like letting you know.
No, but that's, I mean, Bodhi's touched on it, right? Is that one of the, I think the frustrating things about traditional education is that without context and understanding, feels like rote learning is very inhospitable to us.
Yeah.
Dyslexic, I've noticed, tend to resonate once they understand context. And that's why, we as an organization, Noticeability, which can be heard of two ways, noticeability or no disability. What we're focused on are those professions that we know dyslexics will resonate with because it touches upon their cognitive advantages and it gives them the context through which they can now understand why math, or as you say, maths, are applicable, because if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to figure out how much something costs and how much you sold it for, because there's your profit. So context is everything, I think.
And I think as well, we do a podcast as well, but we thought that you two were too handsome to be on the podcast. We thought that the people would have to see you, obviously, so that's what
Amy,
it was.
You know how to win a heart.
I know.
Yeah, thank you.
But, we often have people who come in, and a lot of those people are entrepreneurs. And I once was speaking to someone, and she said that the first thing she did in her first year of business was, before she paid herself, she employed a secretary. Because keeping the dates, responding to emails, making sure that she was at the correct place for the correct meeting on time was just not for her. It wasn't what she excelled at. Selling things and making deals was what she excelled at. So she really prioritized in terms of, before she took any money from the business, she had employed someone else to do that because it was the only way for her to succeed. And
that's fantastic, because it's easier to find a secretary than it is to replicate her ingenuity.
Absolutely.
We just had the very fortunate experience of spending the weekend in Kilkenny with one of Ireland's most brilliant entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, Brendan Morrissey, who started Dyslexic. And it was just a perfect marriage between, somebody who's got incredible ingenuity and knows how to find a group of people that can help realize his dreams. And so have you had him on your podcast?
We have him lined up, yes,
right.
And we also we speak about kind of iDyslexic a lot on Facebook, and we have the information on the website, but it's a really fascinating idea, and I think that particularly you see that level of passion in dyslexic people who want to create a better world for dyslexics, and I think that's a really interesting drive and motivation that kind of you don't get in other people, even though they want to help dyslexic people so much, but I think you can always pinpoint the dyslexic person that's doing it.
Well, it's also, one of the things that I think is challenging to us as a tribe is that we are invisible to each other. I could walk by you on the street and not know that we have this in common. I think the wonderful thing about, what Dyslexia what we're doing, what iDyslexic is doing, is we're starting to bring that tribe together. And then once we get numbers together and we can exchange information about what's not working in the system, what we can do to improve the system, how we can help each other, now all of a sudden we're going to see a rise of this population so that we're on level playing field, if not.
Yeah, and I think that I try to say that to the young people when they come into us, the figures for Ireland are similar to America, so between 1 in 10 people, or probably closer to 1 in 7, 1 in 5 people are dyslexic. So I say to them, you guys came in on the Lewis today, and I say, if you're on a Lewis that's full, there's probably 2 or 3 other dyslexic people on that Lewis. You can't identify each other, but you are, you're similar, and you would have lots of things to talk about if you were put in a room together. And I think it can be difficult, and it can be very isolating, because sometimes it's hard for us to find our tribe and to find other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, also, we have this thing in our school which is called the affinity group, which we can talk about a little bit later. But anyway, somebody was talking to me, and I was talking about how we should really make neurodiversity more commonly known, because most of the people at our school that have neurodiversity try to hide it, or just don't really talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side of that spectrum. I talk about it a little bit too much. My teacher recently mentioned dyslexia, and everybody's head just turned towards me, which is fine. Dyslexia is good, so Of course, every dyslexic is different, so you don't have to share whatever you need. But if you can share it, you'll find more people than you expect to help you through it, help find strategies and all that kind of thing. And I'm going to do a little bit of advertising for you real quick.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
Very well trained.
My dad has some hats and shirts that say dyslexic before school, which I'll let you explain. But just wearing those, like, I've worn those and I've gotten, like, in one day, I've gotten like 5 people coming up to me and like, I'm dyslexic too, that's great. And I'm like, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think definitely the more you say it, the more people are like, oh, me too.
Yeah.
You know, and like you could be in a pub or you could be, you know, just talking to people, or you could be at a sports event and I mention my dyslexia all the time. I'm really boring because like I am dyslexic. I talk about dyslexia all the time. I work in the Dyslexia Association. But aside from that, I say it all the time, and the amount of people that constantly are like, oh, my child is dyslexic, or, you know, and I think it's a huge part of it. I suppose part of the reason I'm really passionate about talking about dyslexia is because, I travel all around Ireland to speak about dyslexia, and I'd speak about my dyslexia for maybe an hour, and a parent would come up to me afterwards and they'd say, oh, my child is, I'm like, what? They've what? And it's the whispering of things, like we whisper about things we're embarrassed of or that are bad. And I think we should be shouting. Like I really do think that we should be shouting about it, and it should become such a normal topic in your house. Do you feel the same? Or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that I will speak to extremely successful dyslexics, and they will still whisper the word.
Yeah.
And they're not traveling by car, they're traveling by private plane. And yet they're still whispering. And, you know, often they will say, well, you know, I just work hard. And I said, yes, that's true. But you can't neglect the fact that you were given a cognitive disposition to be successful at the path you've chosen. And so it's, you know, these two things. And so I think as people start to embrace the fact that their success is not just a product of working hard, but is also neurologically is now being proven to be true, people are going to feel more confident coming out. And the more confident people are, the quicker our tribe can sort of self-identify.
Yeah.
And
can I ask, just in terms of like you're saying, you know, that there are certain areas that people with dyslexia excel at. Can you talk to me a little bit about those? Because I think we often kind of can focus on the bad stuff, and it is important to acknowledge and address the bad stuff, but I think it's hard to see the advantage maybe when you're in the middle of school and it's not maybe what you're thriving at.
Sure. I mean, our entire pedagogy is based on a book called The Dyslexic Advantage, which was written by a pair of neuropsychologists in the state of Washington in the United States. And they've essentially interviewed thousands of dyslexics and distilled this cognitive profile into an acronym with 4 letters. MIND, Material, Interconnected, Narrative, and Dynamic Reasoning. We actually have one of our videos for our course, which describes these MIND strengths available on YouTube. But simply put, and going very quickly, material reasoning is the ability to imagine things in 3-dimensionality in our mind's eye. So this is why many architects or, construction workers.
We've just had a comment actually from James Duffy, who is a cinematographer. So things like that, the ability to,
Exactly, right? And so cinematography is another one of those arts, right? So there is that narrative reasoning. We have an ability to tell a story in a very compelling way. So you look at
It'll happen later. I'm sure there'll be a story coming out of one of us.
Like great orators like Winston Churchill or John F. Kennedy, who were both dyslexic, right? They have the ability to create a compelling vision. Well, that same ability to tell a story can be translated into photography, right? Ansel Adams, perhaps the most famous dyslexic photographer of all time, as well as Agatha Christie in terms of a novelist, right? Or, Lord knows in Hollywood, there's a dyslexic on every corner.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We make tremendous actors. So these interconnected reasoning is sort of the ability to tie together disparate ideas into one consolidated thread, which is why we're very good entrepreneurs, because we can see different patterns emerge and create a solution for that. Dynamic reasoning is almost the ability to sort of predict the future based on what we understand of the past, which is why a lot of us go into earth sciences, geology, understanding, tectonic shifts and what might happen in the future. So it's when you look at what we're capable of and the professions that translates into, you can't help but to get optimistic about the future for dyslexics.
And if you were kind of, I often find when I'm speaking to young people and you tell them this, and I've made up a sheet of all these cool and interesting dyslexics. There's 2 Nobel Prize winners for medicine who are dyslexic, both women. And, you know, you speak about all these things and they kind of say, well, that's great, but like, how do I get there? How do I get past the school bit?
Yeah.
And I think that's hard to answer sometimes because it can be so difficult in school.
Well, it's obviously the school bit is brutal, and you know, you're working to change that. We're working to change that, and there's a lot of organizations in the United States that are focused on legislative change. So it's this, you know, this trifecta of changing the way education works, the way laws perceive us, and then the practices that we can actually apply.
Yeah.
But one of the other frustrations that I hear is, you know, great, I'm dyslexic, but I'm not going to be Richard Branson. I'm not going to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And I think that we need to really focus on what the definition of success is.
Absolutely.
In my mind, I think that success is as Maslow talks about, is self-actualization. When you feel like you are a valued member of your society, people seek out your opinion and you're able to provide value.
Yeah.
So if that means that you are the best, you know, I met a wonderful man in the Minneapolis airport who had, you know, 15 shoe shine stations, and he said, oh, I'm terrible at school, but I really do well in this. I said, you dyslexic by any chance? He said, how did you know that? This gentleman had achieved success, right? He was creating value for his community.
Amazing,
and that's, you know, I'm no Richard Branson, but you know, I feel like I'm able to give back, and that makes me feel successful.
Yeah, and I think that I often speak to young people about actually that you're running your own race. And my favorite thing to say to someone is like, your best is always good enough. Like, I mean, people who set out in a journey, like, or they run the 500 meters in the Olympics. Everyone does their best, whether you come first or last. You can't expect any more than your best from anyone. And sometimes in a spelling test, your best is 2 out of 20. And that's okay. You tried as much as somebody who got 20 out of 20, and that's fine.
Yeah, 2 out of 20 is great.
Yeah.
It's like,
oh, I couldn't even begin
you're just bragging now, huh?
But I do think that sometimes we hold ourselves up to this really rigid standard that you know, maybe you will excel kind of, and I think a lot of dyslexic people, Bodhi, you can let me know if this is generally right, but I think that a lot of us are perfectionists and we push ourselves really hard. Do you find that in school?
Yes, I in myself and my parents, they're still at school, so
yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think sometimes you're just like, I think that often we have young people in here and they're always pushing themselves so hard, and their parents are saying like, this is not coming from me. I don't know where. But it is this want to achieve and to be the same as everyone, and kind of really can take a lot out of you as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think that, you know, our formative years as dyslexics are so deeply shrouded in shame. And that, just as you said, we're trying to prove to the world that we're not what the world thinks we are. And as we, you know, grow into adults, you know, those behaviors aren't shed very easily, right? As a result, I probably don't make a very good example at home of being, you know, self-accepting of where I am. And so, I mean, as much as I want Bodhi to be able, we always preach that let's just go for good enough, right? Good enough is great. But then again, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I may not allow myself to be good enough because I'm still trying to prove something. I'm sorry.
And you're kind of,
I'm sorry.
I think you're in the middle of things and you're like, why have I put so much effort into this? Because at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal, but I do think that there's a lot. And that's why I find it so ironic that dyslexic people sometimes on their report cards or letters from teachers have like lazy written on it. I've never met a lazy dyslexic, ever. Is that your word? I have a theory, right, that everyone with dyslexia has a word that kind of triggers them a little bit. Is lazy your word?
Oh, it's one of many.
Okay.
But yes, but the frustration and the reason I'm having that visceral reaction is because you're absolutely right. There is no dyslexic I've ever met who has said, I just don't feel like trying. Maybe after trying so hard for many, many years, that may be the conclusion they draw. And that's something that I think we all need to work to prevent. But the idea of a teacher translating output as a reflection of a student's input is the worst thing you can say is they're not trying. That's, ooh.
Bodhi, do you have a word that upsets you?
I've got a name that upsets me.
Go on.
Which name? Oh,
you know who.
A teacher?
Yeah.
No.
We leave that off.
Yeah.
I just think that there are sometimes, like, I kind of freak out when somebody says careless. I'm a bit like, because like, I suppose because as I was a kid, it would be like, that was a careless mistake, or you were careless with that. And you're like, I care so much.
Yeah.
I care into the point where I've actually overthought this.
You're so right. I mean, these, and you know, these are throwaway words to the people that say them, but they land like an arrow, and we just bleed for days, if not for years or lifetimes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Rhetoric is key.
I think as well, and I'm really excited to have both of you here to ask this question, but you know, homework and kind of getting through homework and stuff like that. Like, I often say to parents, and I think they're a bit like taken aback, that like some days if you're so frustrated and your child is frustrated and there's like blood, sweat and tears all over the homework, that like that's maybe not the day to do the homework. Like it's the day to go for a walk or get a hot chocolate and just say, you know, today was too much for us.
Mm-hmm.
You had a recent, why don't you tell us about that? It was a big deal.
Last week, Thursday, I had a lot of homework, and so I did it the weekend before, and then they give us the homework Friday for the next week, and then I come into school on Monday, and they assign us tons and tons more homework, and I'm really mad, and it's like much more than I was expecting, and so I'm working, and then Thursday, I have a choice. Either I do it on Thursday, which is still a lot, or I bring it on this trip, and I didn't want to do it on this trip, so I stayed up until 9:45 and did 3.5 hours of homework that day.
Yeah.
And now I don't have to do homework this weekend, which is nice.
Yeah, but there was something interesting. There was a breakthrough that you made, which was there are definitely days that we say, like, you know, you sometimes like to do homework where you do a half an hour and then take a 15-minute or 20-minute break and then a half an hour and so forth. There was something interesting where you just sunk your teeth into a 3-hour assignment, and I saw towards the end this euphoria building, that sense of accomplishment that was, I mean, like, honestly, it was like almost brought a tear to my eye because you were so empowered by the fact that you took this beast and you just completely dominated it.
Yeah. And there's a huge achievement in that as well, where you're just, but I do think like it's important to acknowledge, you know, that some days, like I say to parents, listen, I mean, take how frustrated you are, and then multiply it by 100, and that's how frustrated they are. Because absolutely. I think the nature of dyslexia is really frustrating in that, you know, one day you're the best child in the class at long division, and the next day they sit down to you do your homework, and you're like, I don't remember how to do this. You know, and it's such a difficult, like, I don't remember how to do this, and you know, the parent is saying, like, we did this yesterday. You were so good at it yesterday, and you're like, I know, I was there. It was me that was doing it. But now I can't remember how to do it. And there's nothing, you know, and it's because it takes kind of, you know, dyslexics are quick to learn, but quick to forget as well. And I think once it goes into that long-term memory, we're like elephants. We will remember it forever. But it's making that kind of journey. And I think it can be frustrating to watch, even more frustrating to experience. But I think there are days where it's just not worth it. Like if once a month you just say to your kid, like, listen, this is not, you're not going to learn anything. You're sitting crying. You know?
And it's also, look, I mean, when the question is, you balance the impact of whatever learning assignment that is against the degradation of their motivation. And sometimes it's just it's not worth it at all. And so, and I think we always need to remember that schools may feel they're experts in sixth graders, but we're expert in our children.
Yeah, absolutely.
That voice supersedes.
Yeah, and I think I'm assuming in America it's the same, but here kind of it's you work towards your leaving cert, and that's kind of your final exam, and then based on those scores you have universities and further education and things like that. And I once went to it was kind of a study skills seminar, but it was for young people. But I went because I thought maybe we could encompass some of the stuff and talk to our young people about it and stuff. So I went, and it was like me and like 25, maybe 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They were all taller than me, so I kind of blended in. But I kind of let the instructor know that I'd come just to get this information. And he stood in front of them and he gave this huge big sermon about how this was the most important exam of your life, and you know, if you weren't studying, the person next door to you was going to be studying more, and they were going to get what they wanted to get, and you know, all this sort of stuff. And he went to lunch, and then he said, "Hey, do you want to come to lunch?" I was the only adult in the room, so he was trying to be polite. And I said, no, I'm all right, I have stuff with me. And as he left, I kind of ran up to the top of the class and was like, that is not true. There's a million, I undid all of his work, but I was like, there's a million ways to get to where you want to go. Often the best doctors, nurses, entrepreneurs are people who've lived their lives and have experienced things before they go into college and have taken a year out or have done something really interesting to kind of make them a fuller, rounder human being, and it makes them better at their job. And so I think there can be a lot of pressure towards one end goal. Yeah.
In the United States is very much like that, and you know, nothing like you know, college admission scandal to underscore what I'm talking about. It's, I mean, the one thing that I think is one trend that I think is very positive coming out of the United States is that Silicon Valley, which is where a lot of innovation comes from, are known as these disruptors, these people that don't subscribe to the old traditional way of thinking. And what they're really starting to do is inject this whole methodology, this ethos that you don't need to play by the rules in order to succeed. And that's great news to the dyslexic, because we don't really even know what the rules are.
Exactly, so,
yeah.
We haven't bothered to learn the rules, never mind,
You know, color outside those lines.
Yeah.
It's a way to do it now, so.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, and it's important to kind of remind kids that, you know, there is just a million ways to do something, and often the people who are best equipped to do those jobs are people who have lived a life and who understand.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'd much rather all their dyslexic kids treating me and taking my blood and stuff than someone who just walked out with kind of 600 points in their leaving cert. No one wants to talk to them at parties.
Well, let's just put it this way. Somebody is in Ireland hanging out with you all this morning instead of going to school. So you know how I feel about it.
Bodhi's just been winning this last week. You were speaking about a group that you have in school.
Yeah, so I definitely think there should be better versions of this, but once a month, there's this thing called affinity groups or affinity gatherings, can be called either, and you either get to go to one of these gatherings at the end of the day, or you get tortured. No, actually you just read, but tortured. Yeah. So there were like, this started last year, like Jewish ones, children of color, all these different ones, and it didn't start as one of the originals. Somebody actually went up and got them to make a neurodiversity one.
Cool.
So now there's a neurodiversity one, so we get to go, and it's kind of just, we have a period of the day to just vent to each other and like talk about like all the bad things that are happening in school, which I think is really, really good. And we get to talk about like strategies. For me, it's playing music really, really loud and annoying my parents. So, you know,
it's fine. It's appropriate for your age.
Yeah.
That's really cool, because I think that we have workshops and stuff here where some kind of there's similar stuff they work on, reading and stuff like that as well. And at Dyslexia and Me, we try to get together and kind of sometimes we put all the horrible words that we talked about before up on a big board, and then we like fact check them for fake news. So like they're not stupid, so that's taken off. They're not lazy, so that's taken off. And then we put up the words that we do know about ourselves, that we're kind, that we're good friends, that we're interesting, we're outside the box thinkers, you know, we're good at lots of different stuff. And I think even just the comparison of that side by side and getting to speak about kind of how our dyslexia makes us feel sometimes is really important, because if again, if you're in a classroom of 30 people, while statistically you're not the only one with dyslexia, you might be the only one that's aware of their dyslexia or that wants to talk about their dyslexia. So you can feel isolated even if you're going home to a family full of dyslexics. You still feel in that classroom, oh, it's just me. Yeah.
I'd like to talk about one thing on the board. I do have a little bit of a story that has happened to me. Can I
amazing.
Share that? Can I share that on the
Your dad's
board?
like, I can't remember what the story is.
I know exactly what story
yeah,
he's
no,
going
he
to
knows
say.
exactly what story it is.
Sure.
All right. So last year in 5th grade, I've had a tough 2 years. 5th grade and 6th grade haven't been very kind to me. But in 5th grade, there was this apprentice. I don't know what you guys call them here. Apprentices? They're in the class. Teacher assistant. Yeah. So they're in the classroom observing, and then every now and then they actually teach a class. And the night before, we had a homework where we were supposed to read something in a book, and then write a paragraph about something. I forget what it is now, but it was boring. But I wrote that, and I was like, all right, okay, this is okay. And so I sent it in. And then at the very, very end of the day, I was really tired and I just wanted to go home. And we had one more period of the day. And the apprentice, the teacher's assistant, was like, all right, class, last night's homework, a lot of you guys didn't do so great. Didn't quite meet expectations. I was like, all right, it's not mine. Don't worry. It doesn't matter. I did great. And so then she was like, all right, so this is the second night in a row that some of you haven't done good homework. Other of you guys have done excellent, but some of you haven't done so great. And so she said, okay, I'm going to project somebody's paragraph anonymously, but up on the board, and then look for corrections. So she posted it up, and I'm like, all right, who's this? And just start reading it. And then I realized that it's mine. And she's like, all right, who can find an error in this paper? Everybody's hands went up.
Yeah.
And I'm in the back of the class just looking down, and I'm out of it. And she only shared the one paragraph, which maybe if there had been two, maybe I thought it would have felt like maybe a little bit better. Like, I'm not the only one that did terribly on this. And by the end of the time, when they turned off the projector and it was just the whiteboard, there wasn't any more white on the whiteboard, is how I like to describe it. It was full of corrections, and I just felt terrible about myself.
Yeah, that can be a really difficult one. And I think that we all, I'm sorry. It's very hard to listen to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, like, it's a difficult one, and I think it's everyday stuff that people don't notice how difficult that is. For example, like, we talk to teachers and we say, like, if they do things, don't get them to swap to the side to correct, like swap with their partner to correct, because you're just handing something to someone being like, this is full of mistakes. I know it's full of mistakes. And it's little things that, teachers would have no idea what the impact is. But I remember the embarrassment, like the hotness in my face, handing that to someone I sat beside to say, and then you're the whole time just kind of, I think that's why a lot of us are like funny and stuff, because you're handing that to someone and you're saying like, oh, I know now don't like, because it's so difficult.
Well, it's so true. And I mean, in the United States, a lot of the very negative outcomes for youth, meaning drug and alcohol addiction, incarceration, school attrition, are overrepresented by dyslexics. And, my theory being, and it's not a unique theory, is that, if you feel lousy enough about yourself day after day and you are offered an opportunity to self-medicate or, throw a brick through a window, there's a very low threshold of acceptance into those groups. And so you can do those things and be accepted and get the affirmation that you've always wanted. And so that's why it's particularly dangerous to not address these issues, because I think that it changes lives for the negative. Coincidentally, we do know that statistically, those students that are able to find empowerment, those with learning differences that do become empowered, in large part attribute that to a compassionate adult mentor who understood what they were going through and able to articulate that and support them in subtle ways. And that is where all of us, regardless of whether or not we're dyslexic or teachers or not, you can look for the good in dyslexic children and articulate it, because that goes miles or kilometers in this case. It goes a long distance in terms of the impact on the student.
And do you think, like, if you could give, say, somebody a few tips in terms of if they notice that their child's self-esteem has started to take a dip, or they feel like, what do you think? I think we constantly talk about having to, like, not let negative statements kind of sit with a child. Don't let them get away with saying certain things about themselves. And
yeah, there's a lot of studies talking about how the neural pathways that self-talk start to carve into our minds, and the idea is disrupting that negative talk, that pessimism, because it can become habitual. One of the things that we do as a family is we try to find areas that Bodhi becomes incredibly passionate about and loses time. And, it's wonderful that some of them actually happen to be things that I lose time in. And so we can embark on that. Like coming to Ireland is a wonderful opportunity for us. So trying to find places where your child is fully empowered and feeding it as much as possible. What would you say? That's the most important person in the room. What would you say is the best way to interrupt that self-talk? Because sometimes you deal with that, I deal with that.
I definitely agree. Find something to lose time. Like for me, what it is taking a break and finding a good song. I like to play music really loud, as I said earlier. And it's just really helpful. It just really pumps me up, and then I can usually go back into it.
I think that's a great one as well. It's just as well, like, sport or speech and drama, or something that as a kid you can think to yourself like, oh, well, I didn't do well in that spelling test, but I'm really good at soccer, or I'm really good, so being good at other things maybe outside of school is something that's brilliant as well. I think my mum used to terrorize me with my dyslexia report, because anytime I'd say something like, oh, I'm so stupid or something, she'd like whip it out of somewhere. I firmly believe that she had maybe 15 of them printed around the house. They would materialize. And she would say, well, actually, I paid this lady a lot of money to do this report. Will I ring her and tell her that she said you're very clever here? Will I ring her and tell her she was wrong, or what? And you're like, oh no, like I'm just, and then you would actually naturally stop saying it, because I didn't want to get into it. Every time was a huge conversation about it. So I was like, well, I'll stop saying the word because I actually can't deal with it. And I think that's a really good tactic, in that actually, dyslexic kids have a confirmation that they're not stupid. They have, it's proven, it's, impossible for them to be, less than, average, and often above average in their intelligence. So I think interrupting the words that we say about ourselves is really good with solid reminders.
I'm a big fan of a gentleman named Martin Seligman, who's a professor out of the University of Pennsylvania. He's the one who ultimately came up with learned helplessness. And in the last 30 years, he's been working on learned optimism, which is the antithesis, the panacea for learned helplessness. And basically what it talks about is the way that we work on a cognitive level is we interpret an action. I failed this test. We interpret that and then construct a belief. I am stupid because I failed this test. And what happens is that wheel continues to turn and the neural pathway forms. What he talks about is finding disputative information, where it is disputing the claim that you've addressed. So I failed this test. I'm stupid. And then wait a minute, but I did really well in that other class. That's the dispute of information. And then that produces an energization, which then starts to change that cycle of thinking in the opposite direction. So just as you said, Mom, I'm stupid. Dispute of information is that's not what this psychological report says. And then you go, oh, all right, fair enough. And they start to turn the wheel the other way. So there's a lot of research indicating that's a powerful mechanism.
Yeah, and I think it can be exhausting for parents to kind of have to be on guard for that and watch out for it. Yeah. But I think actually it starts to become a habit and a way of life very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think you get used to just interrupting that, and then they start to do it themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like your child with dyslexia is like, it's like whatever financial advisor tells you about your retirement fund. Make the investment early, like early, and let it compound, right? If we turn a blind eye, it's really, it can have devastating consequences. Act now. Yeah.
Amazing. I think that's a really nice kind of way to finish. So I was just wondering, what's been like your highlight of Ireland? Have you taken anything away that you're going to kind of, bring to America? Hurling. Excellent.
I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited.
We got a big game between Dublin and Kilkenny in about an hour and a half.
You do indeed. You'll have to get back to your hotel for that.
We are.
But I think have you felt like it's been a valuable learning experience, or
absolutely? I mean, this is not only a beautiful place with wonderful people, that goes without saying, but there's again, you can come to a different country and you can start talking about dyslexia and instantly you have a family.
Yeah.
That's pretty unique.
It is very unique. So what I am going to do is I am going to link all of the information for Noticeability on the website, so you can look through some of the stuff. We can watch your TED Talk, Dean. So we'll make sure that it's all up there. I would like to thank you very much for coming in to see me.
Just one more thing. Yes. I wanted to mention that I was hoping that you would mention, but I just mentioned the catchphrase dyslexic before is cool, and it took me a little while to get it, so I just wanted you to explain it.
Yeah, the whole idea is that if you have this thing, dyslexic before it's cool, on your t-shirt or on your hat, the whole idea is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to project a future that is about to come by saying that when the world realizes how innovative and creative and brilliant dyslexics are, that it's going to become a trend, so that everyone starts to pose as if they're dyslexic. Like, I'm dyslexic too. And no.
Yeah.
I was dyslexic before it was cool. Yeah. And that's our war cry, right?
Very cool.
That we're all in this together, and the world will soon awaken, and we were there on the ground level.
I think that is so cool.
Thanks for the plug.
It's very
problem.
Good.
I actually had somebody when I was doing a talk ask, all right, I like the idea of this dyslexia. Where can I get some? And I'm like, no, my friend.
You're not lucky. You have to hit the genetic jackpot.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just wanted to give you some T-shirts, some Ireland T-shirts.
Thank you.
To kind of have your
so much.
To bring home and kind of remember your trip to Ireland.
That's awesome.
So thank you so much, Bodhi and Dean. It's been amazing to speak to you, and we'll kind of have some of your content up on the Facebook page, and we'll have your YouTube video live soon. So thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.